What's up, everybody? Josh at EVOQ.BIKE here, and we're talking starts for cyclocross. We got a lot to cover, so we're going to jump right into it. So, number one thing for starts, don't miss your start. Know what time your race starts. Know if the races are starting on time or early. I don't think I've ever seen anything start early, but if it's starting late, just make sure you're on time. The worst is you have this great call up your front row, and then you miss it, and then your last row, or maybe you missed the start altogether and like you're 30 seconds back chasing. Just make sure you're at your start time. You know when the start is and you're there and you know where it is. We talked about that in the pre-ride video. Know where the start is because usually it's in a different location and maybe you didn't ride it. So just know those things before, obviously before your race starts. Okay, so starts staging. Know how the race is staged. Usually for different categories, they could be different. It might be different. Yeah, it might in one race the staging could be different. If it's like there's the elite men and women, which are based on like UCI points or whatever, down to like the Cat 5, Cat 4, which could be on order of registration. So there's a emphasis there. There's a advantage on those races to sign up sooner so that you get a better start position. So yeah, it could be order of reg, it could be points in a series, it could be UCI points. It could be typically it's based for most races off of like cross results. I can do a little link if anyone isn't familiar with cross results. It ranks you by different points, and then it'll do like the race predictor, and then a lot of times promoters will do the call-ups based on those numbers, a bunch of different I don't really know how the numbers work. You guys can check that out. But yeah. So you know where you're going to be. You got your number. You're called up. It's like there's different, could be first row, second row, last row, could be whatever. So then you get called into the grid, and hopefully you've done some practice laps then. So you're in the grid, the corral. Know where you want to be. So let's say like best case scenario, you're the first person, you're your first row, first person call up. So out of the 8 spots there, typically 8, like, do you want to be in the middle? Do you want to be in the left? Do you want to be on the right? In your pre-ride that you've done, did a video on that. Is there a pothole up the road? Is there like if it's a left-hand turn, down and you want to set up on the right, maybe you want to go there. Maybe there's some type of, obstruction on the right. So you want to be in the middle or you want to be on the left. Know those things so you know where to be. And then if you're second row, if you're third row, know who's around you. It's the same thing. Maybe you want to be on the right, you want to be on the left, but maybe you know that if you're second row, there's a dude who always wins the Holeshot, who does well, who's on the first row. Get behind that guy. Or there's Jenny CX who always paces it really well and is winning all these races. Let's get on her wheel and let's stick with her. So know where you want to be once you get in the corral. Know your competitors. We talked about that. Stay towards the outside. Give yourself some room. Yeah. So I'd say also, if you don't know, maybe you don't know anybody. Maybe you're whatever second row, or maybe you didn't look at the start. Maybe stay towards more the outside. If you have that option, start on the left or start all the way on the right, so that maybe you can come around some people, or gives you a little out if there's a crash or stuff like that. Just something else to think about. Okay, so got your call up, you're in the corral, you're all set up, everyone's there, and you probably got like 3-5 minutes or whatever. What should you be doing? That's the time in the staging where you should be. If you have a gel with you, maybe you take that pre-race gel. If it's cold out, maybe you have your pre-ride jacket on, or like your breakaway pants that we talked about. I think that was like the first video I did for your warm up, just to stay warm. Because if it's raining or cold or snowing or whatever, you're going to want to stay, as warm as you can for as long as you can. And then when you get like the 1 minute countdown, then you take the jacket off, and then you get your number exposed, and then you take the pants off. And you can toss them to your friend or somebody else's friend. Usually there's always someone there who's willing to like catch your jacket and put it on the, outside of the course. Thank you everyone for doing that. So do that. You can also, that's a good time to start your Garmin, make sure everything's on. If it's a watch or your head unit, whatever, make sure you're in the right gear, and we'll get more into that below. But yeah, you shouldn't be chatting with your friends. I mean, you can chat, but you should have your little mental checklist, and we're going to get through that in a little bit. And then also, this is a good time, if you haven't done this, to clean your cleats out. Maybe you have like a little screwdriver, or maybe you did this before you got to the start, but maybe you walked through some mud on their way to the start. Make sure your cleats are clean on your shoes, and make sure your pedals are clean. Sometimes people will have like a little screwdriver that they'll put in their warm up jacket, and then when you toss it, like it's gone. It's not, maybe you're wearing a skin suit, you don't have any pockets. We talked about that in another video as well. But yeah, so think about that. Okay, so that's your time in staging. Now we're going to go into some tactics here. So people think about starts. A lot of times you think exclusively about the whole shot. Like, okay, this is the most important thing. I want to win. But not really. You don't always want to win the whole shot. There's a whole thought process here. I think there are some times, based on courses and, again, tactics, or, what your goal is for the race. Like I'm saying, tactics, maybe you want to go out hot. Like, you're like, I'm going to drop everybody. I need this whole shot. But yeah, in your pre-ride, maybe you don't want to lead the first lap. We'll get into that, but maybe you want to be the first person in, because it goes into single track, depending on the race, or like there's a curb. I've done a race where there's like this right-hand turn into a curb, and I'm like, I think there's going to be a crash here, so I want to win the whole shot so I can take this curb on this. There's like a little not 2x4, but like there's a little platform built up over this curb. I want to be the first person to hit it. So think about that. No, again, going back to the pre-ride of being first is probably better, or maybe not. Maybe you're starting last row. No big deal. Like, you don't have that option. Like, you don't have to worry about the whole shot. So yeah, there could be a competitor who goes out fast. Maybe you want to get in front of them, or maybe you want to just stay with them. You aren't going to win the race on the first lap. You're not going to lose it either. You're definitely not going to lose it, but you can go through your whole match book. Like, if you get the whole shot and you're just like, I'm just going to lead and I'm going to drop everyone, and it doesn't go well, like you burned all your matches. And we talked about in other videos, like your FRC and fatigue resistance. We talked about those in the cross training videos. Those are all the things that you don't want to just deplete yourself in that first lap. So have a plan. There's a lot of things that we touched on here, but, and then also, like, I talked to my athletes about this. Nobody cares if you win the whole shot or if you win the first lap. Like, everyone cares about who won the race. So be smart there. There isn't a huge advantage, like I said, to leading the first lap. Maybe winning the whole shot, yes, there could be an advantage, but necessarily leading the whole first lap or the whole first couple laps, let somebody else do that. Let somebody else set the pace and conserve. There's so much to be said for being smart and planning for the end of the race, and not just trying to win that first lap. I don't think I've ever seen a cross race with a preem, but maybe they're out there. Maybe you do want to win that first lap preem. But yeah, so just be smart. And if you're starting last row, it's a super long race. So you will have the advantage there of pacing yourself, because you won't have the ability to go out and go super hot. So remain calm. And if you get caught in a setback, or like a crash or something, like, don't worry about it, because your last row, you don't have an option. Just be smart. It's a good position to be in. Like, if you, I wasn't going to make this comparison, but like, you think of like Matthew Vanderpool when he starts off, like, usually he misses those first couple of races in the United States. And then once the cross, his series gets going in Europe, the races that he starts, he's usually like last row, because those guys all ahead of him have all done those races and gotten those points. And he has to claw his way back, and he wins. Yes, that's Matthew Vanderpool, but I'm just saying, like, those skills, you can learn those skills. You can be good at passing. Watch the cornering video. There are ways to start last row or start in the back and get around people and still do well. So think of it as an added challenge. Yeah, just something to think about. And then also, so with the staging based on cross results, I was reading an article and they were saying, like, oh, if your cross results has you, third row, if you're starting, what's that, like in the top 8, 16, 24 people, like, don't go too nuts and try to get ahead of these people who are probably better than you. I'm sorry, I strongly disagree with that, because you're traveling to these races, and yeah, I don't think you should ruin anybody else's race and like dive bomb anything, but you want to do well. And I think that if you're starting third row, like, next race, you want to start second row, or you want to get for the first row. So yes, I think cross results is good for like staging, obviously, but don't think that means that, like, oh, I'm not going to win, or I don't have an option to win. Like, these guys are better than me, or these ladies are better than me. go out there and do your best. But like, you're not, like I said, the start isn't going to make or break your race, unless you don't show up on time. But yeah, so you're always racing to improve your spots. So every little bit counts. Yeah. And if you have a bad start and this happens and it's part of racing, it's a good time to work on your passing. It's a good time to work on being conservative and knowing like, okay, hey, like my FRC, my matches, my matchbook, I'm not going to burn the whole thing. Like I'm going to take my time. I'm going to find the spots on the course that are good for me and make those passes. Find the spots that are bad for everyone else, make passes there. And then don't mentally blow up. Like everyone has like that physical blow up, but don't mentally psych yourself out. So much of this is just staying confident and being like, okay, hey, this is a long race. Like I make this comparison to like, again, going with the pros, these guys are at a different level. Like Tom Pidcock very rarely has a good start. And I think I've read articles where he has worked on this, but he makes mistakes. He misses his pedal. He'll be second row. And then all of a sudden you see him like he's with the fifth row guys, but he's slow. He's so good that he's good at passing and pacing himself that he works his way up. You can even go to the Olympic mountain bike race and watch that he didn't have the best start. But yeah, so much there. Okay, so starting technique. Let's get into that a little bit. And this technique, you have to do this all in person. I'll give you guys some ideas, but go out and practice like everything else, and then have your mental checklist. And we're going to go through those things. So once you go to the race and you're in the corral or you're going to the start, like think about these certain things. Okay, hey, this is my routine. This is my ritual for what I do. And then boom, like 30 seconds, I'm good to go. Like 30 seconds from the official, counting it down. I guess I didn't touch on that here, but like, yeah, typically it would be like the 1 minute, the official will give you once you're all in the corral and ready to go, like 1 minute, and then typically 30 seconds. And then I think it's like 5 seconds, and then they'll count down, and maybe there's a clock if it's like super pro, or usually the official blows a whistle, and we'll get to that. Like maybe there's a little technique there to give yourself a little edge by watching the official, but okay, mental checklist, or we're not there yet, but things to think about once you're the actual technique and you're practicing. Okay, so your bottom, your rear end. I'm talking about your butt, where that is. It's either on the saddle, or you can have it off the saddle, or maybe on the top tube. There's different ways of going about this. On the saddle, typically, like you're balancing on one foot. That's like maybe for like a pavement start, where you have really good traction. And if you're on the top tube, which is like obviously off the saddle, or maybe you're not balancing on the top tube, but you're just hovering over the top tube. That's maybe for a start with less traction. If you're on like, I don't know, grass, or if it's a muddy start. But so much of this is personal preference. Practice this, see what you like better, see where you can accelerate the best. This also goes for your hands, your hand position. You'll see majority of the pros and just cross racers in general start with their hands on the hoods, just because you can shift a bit faster. It's a bit counterintuitive to like when you watch like a pro, like a road sprint, or even a sprint in a cross race. When it comes down to it, like they're typically in the drops. I'll get in the drops if I'm sprinting with a couple of guys. But again, practice is, see what works for you, see what's more comfortable for you. That's all personal preference. Yeah. Okay. So we're getting into the checklist, your gearing. Okay. It changes for different courses. I would say probably a lot of this stuff changes for different courses. Like we talked about the terrain for where you're positioned on the saddle or off the saddle, where your hands are. Your hands maybe not so much, unless maybe you're going into like a super technical descent. But you wouldn't see that in a start. But okay, your gearing. So know where in the cassette that you typically have, like, have the chain there for where the start. Maybe it's a bit further closer to the 11, like I'm saying, this is if you're doing, I'm thinking for me, if I'm doing like my 11 speed with the, 11 tooth cog being the smallest, maybe I'm like 3 up. I can't remember exactly where I put it. But yeah, I'm like 3 up, knowing that, okay, once the race starts, I'm going to click through this. That could change also like where you are in the grid. Like that's, if you're front row, like, okay, I want to be able to explode out of this, but say you're back row, like I don't need to be in this huge over, high torque gear. Give yourself some room to maybe maneuver a little bit more. So take that into account where you are, what your RPM, what your cadence is going to be like once you start pedaling. So find that, get there. That should be number one. Always know where you're starting. Number 2 is your pedal position. And this is, again, practice, personal preference. See if your left foot is unclipped and like that's, you're balancing on that. Turn the pedal so that when it comes around in that revolution, like you can get your cleat right into that. Again, you got to practice with that. See what works best for you. Find that little tweak and just put it there every time. And then also make sure, I touched on this before, but make sure your pedals and your cleats are clear. Like, you can go through all this, but if you have a huge chunk of mud on your cleat and your pedal is filled with mud, like, you're not going to clip in. And the whole point of this is to clip in as fast as you can. But if you don't clip in, if you make a mistake and your race isn't over with, keep pedaling. And you should practice this too. Like, that stuff is going to happen. You're going to make mistakes. It's just, this is cross. So keep pedaling. Just get your foot on the pedal and keep going. You're not gonna, maybe you lose a few positions, maybe you don't, maybe you keep going. Again, going back to the mental side of things, be prepared for when these issues happen. Just, persevere. It's not a setback for the race. It's just a little blip in the race. Okay, your rear wheel. Even if you start only on tarmac, maybe it's muddy, maybe it's icy, maybe it's raining and it's wet and there's a puddle or whatever, know that your rear wheel has some traction. So just move, maybe like when you're in the corral and you're starting, like use your shoe to clear some mud or to clear some ice or whatever, or move over a little bit to the left or right to know that you have some traction on that rear tire, so that, like, as soon as you clip in, like, you do all this great and you clip in and then your rear wheel is just spinning out. You don't want that. So something to take into consideration there. And then last, for your little mental checklist, is your eyes, where you're looking. Okay, so typically it's the official on the side of the course, and he has a whistle and he gives you the countdown, 1 minute. He's watching, he's watching his watch. Here's a little stopwatch. Watch him. If he stays at the front of the race in your front row or second row and he's got the whistle to his mouth and he's like, okay, 5 seconds, and you can see him, he's getting ready. Okay, like, it's coming quick. So keep your eyes on him. A lot of officials now, what they'll do is they'll count, they'll do the 30 seconds and then they'll walk to the back, or so the front row can't see him or her, whoever the official is. But yeah, it's just something to think about. But also just be alert, be listening, have your eyes ahead, know where you want to go. Another thing I wanted to mention in regards to that Holeshot is maybe the races change. So, and we talked about this with the cornering and picking your lines. Maybe your goal is, hey, I want to be like top 5, but maybe the course has changed and it's gotten super muddy, and maybe it went crazy and they moved the stakes. So now, like, there's a different, there's more grass on one side of the course. So you're like, okay, I want to get to that portion on the start so I can have more traction, like green means go. So just know that starting position, just like the rest of the course, can change as the race progresses. So just always be thinking about that. Like, get to the starting corral a little bit early, know where you want to be, know if it's changed at all, and like what your tactics are going into that. And again, there's so much here. I would say number 1, just get there on time, and then practice your starts. Like, all this work should be done before you even get to the race, So just get out there, hit me up if you have any questions, Josh@EVOQ.BIKE. And yeah, tons of skills to work on. This isn't, the most important, I would say, cornering, which is the main video we did, but something else to consider. So good luck with all your practice, and yeah, see you guys at the races.